Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to perhaps one of the most important and interesting videos posted on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to replay an interview from one of the world's top trumpet podcasts, Trumpet Dynamics, hosted by James Newcomb in the USA. Now, I do own a trumpet. This is my beautiful Yamaha Bobby Shoe model trumpet. I also own a Pocket Trumpet, a Carroll brass Pocket Trumpet, and a beautiful Yamaha flugelhorn. I consider myself an absolute beginner on all of the brass instruments, a novice. I don't teach the instruments. I occasionally play them for my own satisfaction, and I occasionally post videos to my YouTube channel featuring me playing the brass instruments. It's ironic then that I was invited to be interviewed on one of the most prestigious trumpet-related podcasts in the universe. James Newcomb is a former professional trumpet player from the US military service bands. Nowadays he's a music entrepreneur and he produces podcasts of all shapes and sizes corporately and music ones like Trumpet Dynamics for himself. He's a great person and I really recommend that you check out the many exciting facets of James Newcomb on jamesnewcombontrumpet.com, and I'll put the links in the show notes to this video so you can listen to the full range of wonderful interviews that James has conducted. So how did I get to be interviewed on Trumpet Dynamics where I can barely play a C scale on a trumpet? Well, I recently interviewed one of the world's very best contemporary trumpet players for my own podcast series, The Music Mind. Episode 2 featured Jim Manley from St. Louis, an extraordinary trumpet player. I got in contact with James Newcomb and just sent him a link to the Jim Manley podcast in the hope that he might be interested to let some of his listeners learn more about the great Jim Manley. James has done that and he contacted me for an interview. I think I'm the first non-trumpet player to ever be interviewed on Trumpet Dynamics. This is really important because if you're out there and you're struggling on an instrument, whatever it is, guitar, sax, flute, piano, maybe trumpet, and you're wondering if there's any future for you because you're constantly battling that instrument, my advice is, if you can play a few notes on the instrument, find a way to express yourself with the technique you currently have. If I lived to be 300, I could never improve on the version of Flight of the Bumblebee by Rafael Mendez or Harry James. From my perspective, don't even try, because even if you got close to it, you would always be compared to those masters. If you're a professional trumpet player, yes, by all means, go as high and as fast and as loud and as accurate as you can. But if you just play an instrument for the fun of it, don't limit your mind as to what you can do for the fun of it on an instrument with comparatively limited technique. Before I put on my interview on Trumpet Dynamics with James Newcomb, I just want to play two tracks for you, two videos where I do play the trumpet. The first is a duet, a pocket trumpet duet, of an original little blues that I just call Pocket Trumpet Blues. It features me playing one of the pocket trumpet tracks with a Harmon mute and the other with a cup mute. I haven't got the technique of a Doc Severinsen, but I've got the technique I needed to express myself on Pocket Trumpet Blues. The second track, and if you do listen to the full interview with James Newcomb, there's a point in the interview where live he's looking through my YouTube channel and he comes across a video that I've got on that channel called Tijuana Groove, featuring the Electric Trumpet. And he asked me during the interview, what was the Electric Trumpet? Well, it's simply a trumpet that has one of these piezo barrel pickups fitted to the mouthpiece, which allowed me to run the output of that pickup, in the case of Tijuana Groove, through a harmonizer pedal. So while I was playing just some simple single notes on the trumpet, those notes were being automatically harmonized into 3 and 4 part harmony. If you listen closely in Tijuana Groove, you'll also hear a little fleet-fingered backup support trumpet with a wah-wah sound. Now, I'm not using a plunger mute. I'm actually on a separate track running the output from the pickup into an auto wah-wah pedal. So all of the trumpets you hear on these videos are me. And remember, I'm a person who can barely play a single octave of a C major scale. So have a look and listen to Pocket Trumpet Blues, followed by Tijuana Groove, followed by the full audio interview conducted by James Newcomb, interviewing me for the prestigious Trumpet Dynamics Podcast. I hope you really enjoy this posting, and if you're struggling on an instrument out there, take heart from what you see and hear on this clip. You don't have to be a virtuoso player to provide wonderful content for the enjoyment of yourself and others all around the world on the instrument with the technique you currently have. Enjoy.
If you like this show and would like to support it, look for the little support button on your podcast player. You can learn more about me, James Newcomb, and access the many materials that I offer on my mobile app at www.jamesnewcombontrumpet.com. So, let's get on with the show. It's the story of the trumpet, in the words of those who play it. What is it about this crazy mass of metal tubing that makes us laugh, cry, want to flat out quit at times, and then keep coming back for more? My name is James Newcomb, and I am thrilled to host this show that brings on world-famous, not famous, and everything in between trumpeters to share what keeps the trumpet blowing and the music flowing. It's the Trumpet Dynamics Podcast, and it begins now. Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is James Newcomb. I am happy to be in your earballs on this continuing adventure with our friend, our compatriot, our nemesis, the trumpet, here on the Trumpet Dynamics Podcast. Today, I am pleased to feature an interview with someone who is not a trumpet player, but has plenty of value to share nonetheless. Mr. Brian Hayes is located in Australia and has a wealth of information to share. He's got a thriving YouTube channel, and we can find all about Brian Hayes at brianhayes.biz, brianhayes.biz is where we can find him on the web. And I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here. I thought to myself, man, you booked this appointment with this saxophone player. Why don't you just do your obligatory 25 minutes and cut it off and get on with life? And so I can say that I have this magnanimous attitude towards other instruments, but focus on what's really important, which is the trumpet. That was sort of my attitude going into this interview with Brian, and I was pleasantly surprised at how things panned out. It was really interesting and really stimulating for me personally, and I think it will be for you as well. A lot of good insights on business, thriving as a so-called musicpreneur, and what can I say? I enjoyed it, and I think you'll enjoy it too. So again, find him at brianhayes.biz, and he's also got a wonderful YouTube channel. Even if you don't need to learn how to play jazz standards on saxophone, the YouTube channel is a great example of kind of how to do things if you're interested in starting a YouTube channel of some sort. It's just a good model to follow. And if you check it out, you'll see why. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Now, a little bonus with this episode is we get to interview by proxy the great Jim Manley, the freelance specialist, fabulous trumpet player in the St. Louis area. Brian interviewed Jim for his YouTube channel, and towards the end of our interview, I asked if I could play that interview on this podcast feed, and Brian said, absolutely, the more people can hear it, the better. And so if you're looking at your podcast player right now, be it Apple, Spotify, Acast, whatever the case may be, you're going to see it's probably titled Bonus Interview with Brian Hayes and Jim Manley. And so that's just a little bit of explanation as to what you're seeing. I'm publishing both of them in tandem so that you can listen to this one and then that one, or that one and then this one, whichever suits your fancy. But plenty of content coming into your earballs this weekend. So, again, I'm James Newcomb. My URL is jamesnewcombontrumpet.com. Check it out. Keep in touch, and let's get on to it. Here's my conversation with Brian Hayes. Well, we're getting to know each other, and we've already pressed record, so we're just kind of chewing the fat here for people listening in. And Brian reached out to me, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. He said that he's been listening to some of the shows that I've been producing over the years, and he enjoys it. And he's not a trumpet player. He's a saxophone player, but he just, I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was basically, I like it. And I do remember what it was. You actually turned me on to an episode that you did with a new show that you're doing featuring trumpeter Jim Manley.
That's right.
Who's just a fantastic player, wonderful guy.
Absolutely.
And I think I spoke to him on one of my shows several years ago. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But good guy, unbelievable player, and a real gift.
And a gift as a teacher, too. I got to know Jim probably a couple of years ago. I've had a lifelong interest in the trumpet. I own a trumpet. I dabble in the trumpet. But a couple of years ago, I thought I'll reach out and take a few online lessons. And Jim was one of the first guys I took a lesson from. And I was just blown away with how he could simplify what a lot of other people seem to make a very complex process of playing the trumpet. Jim has his own wonderful way of bringing that back to a simple process. It doesn't mean that at the end of a lesson with Jim that you suddenly, play like Doc Severinsen, but I think it certainly gave me a completely different viewpoint of how that instrument could be dealt with. So, so I reached out to him. I've started a new podcast called The Music Mind. So it's instrument independent. My first guest was a guitar player, professional guitar player here in Australia for 50 years, my brother, Mike Hayes. And my second guest was Jim Manley. And my third, which I haven't recorded yet, is a fantastic Australian saxophonist and flute player called Andrew O.
Well, I'm actually interested in this interview with Jim Manley because it was lengthy. So of course we can't play it on this show. But give us some highlights. What were some of the things?
Well, the real highlights for me, yeah, absolutely. And anyone who wants to watch the podcast, if they just Google the Music Mind Jim Manley, it'll come straight up on YouTube for them there. But look, I think some of the highlights for me was an absolute discovery. Jim's recorded 19 albums. Some are big band albums, some are funk contemporary albums, some are sort of love song albums. So all different styles of trumpet playing, except classical. He's not a classical trumpet player. He's working on his 20th album, and I've got all of them, and I just marvel when I listen to some of those tracks. I just marvel at his playing. But when I was talking to Jim, I sort of assumed, listening to the technique and the range of Jim, that he would be like Doc Severinsen, someone who practices 8 hours a day, 2 hours on the mouthpiece, reading, the Arben's book upside down and up an octave, as I said in the thing, something complex, playing a bit of jazz and then going out and performing. Jim's not that. Jim sort of, in the interview, made it clear that he was never a natural on the trumpet. It did not come easy to him. And he's spent decades looking for the answer for him for efficiency, because he realised pretty early on that he wasn't going to be able to do what he was doing as a 20-year-old when he was 40 or 50 or 60 years old. So my first thing was that, he wasn't a natural. He wasn't. Anyone who hears Jim Manley, he has this amazing range on the trumpet where his sound remains big and fat when he's playing double high C and big and fat when he's playing low F sharp, which most trumpet players, or many trumpet players, can sound like a flea in danger when they're playing up high, or a mosquito, and a non-existent low range if they've worked on the high range. So my first thing is that to discover that the high notes never, he actually says in the interview, he used to be terrified when he saw a fifth line F, an F that's not out of the stave, just the top line. He was, as a young player, terrified of that range, or not being able to even get out of the start. So that was one thing. And the other thing was reading music. So there's plenty of clips on YouTube of Jim playing lead trumpet with some swing bands. And the other thing that amazed me is Jim said he's not a good reader. He does read music, but he's not your typical lead trumpeter who can, just machine gun through a chart first up. He actually said, it would terrify him. The lifestyle of the Los Angeles studio players is not for him, because that's just not him. Under the gun, to be able to read something first up. So they're two things that surprised me, but I suppose for trumpet players who are listening, should give people some hope, that you can be a really amazing trumpet player without necessarily being a natural or finding it easy, or being an amazing sight reader.
Right.
They were two things that I took out of it.
Yeah, he's got certain strengths that he has, and he has his weaknesses. And I'm just taking notes because I'm going to reach out to him and talk to him on the show. And but we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, and it sounds to me like Jim just found that one thing, and he's just laser focused on that one thing that he can excel at. But it's interesting that you say that he simplifies trumpet, because I've heard so many, like every person I ask on the show that's a trumpet player anyway, what got you started? And I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, well, I was trying to choose, or I was just deciding which to choose, and the trumpet had only 3 buttons, and so and that's just like the 9-year-old or 10-year-old mind thinking this, and then they realize, well, it's much more difficult than that. And
well, it's interesting. I asked Jim about that, and here in Australia, and certainly from my era, I grew up in the 60s, and And going to school in Australia in the 60s, the man never come around with the instruments. I know that's an American thing that I listen to all the podcasts and, in grade 5 or grade 6 or something, the man turned up with. Didn't happen in Australia. You're flat out, so there was maybe in a few select schools, but the average person who went to school in the 60s in Australia music was not an option. So for Jim, it was a case the man come around. But from memory, I think Jim, I might be wrong on this, but I think he said he was actually interested in the trombone, but the man had given away the trombones. So Jim's reason for picking the trumpet was his parents, like mine, here in Australia in that era, had a number of Herb Albert records and the Tijuana Brass. And so Jim was attracted to that music at home, and he remembered the album or the photo on the Lonely Bull, the image of a trumpet. So when the man came around to the school, he recognised no trombones, but hang on a minute, I recognised the shape of that instrument, and that's the reason Jim Manley took up the trumpet, because it looked like what Herb Albert was playing on the Lonely Bull.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, a trumpet is basically a soprano trombone, if you think about it.
Yeah. And I understand from some podcasts that Doc Severinsen actually also wanted to play the trombone, but his arms weren't long enough, and his father wouldn't let him get a trombone. So his father got a second-hand old cornet from the local garage mechanic, and that's the start of Doc Severinsen's career. He was apparently pretty cheesed off that he couldn't get a trombone. So it's just amazing how people
I have a story to share, because on this show I recently republished a wonderful show that I did 5 years ago, and it was a tribute to William Vacchiano, the great American orchestral trumpeter. And the way that he got started on trumpet is that, well, he got his start on the cornet, but his father was Italian, and he said, "Okay, you're going to get a clarinet when you go to school." He put some money in his thing, and so young William is 8-9 years old. He gets to school, and he can't remember what he's supposed to get, I guess the cornet came before the clarinet, and he said, "Yep, that's what I need. It's the cornet." So he got him confused, and destiny had him being one of the greats of all time.
Oh, absolutely. And look, just talking, even though I'm not a trumpeter, I've had a fascination with the instrument most of my life. So I can tell some trumpet stories with other players that I've interacted with. And I'll start with James Morrison, who I'm sure you're probably aware of, the Australian multi-instrumentalist.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. So James came from a sort of the equivalent, I suppose, of a Salvation Army background. His father was a minister, and they would change church, where the church location was every year or whatever. So James grew up hearing the sounds of the music in the church, but he also had access, like in most community bands, to just the whole range of instruments. So he could go down into the basement, pick up a euphonium and think, oh, okay, what's that? Pick up a tenor horn, pick up a trombone or whatever. So it's really interesting that one of the things that is fascinating about James Morrison is his absolute lack of a warm-up. So, these guys, the trumpet guys, as I say, I own a trumpet, but I love listening to how these guys just are terrorized about the thought of someone coming in and saying, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's go, without having whatever your normal routine warm-up is. Now, James Morrison, someone asked him one day, why you don't warm up? And Jim Manley is fascinated that James Morrison does not warm up. He shared an experience with James in Denmark or the Netherlands or somewhere, and just couldn't believe that Jim and all the other players are all, doing their warm up, and James is just sitting there reading a book or something. And then when it's time to play, he picks up his trumpet and away we go. James's answer to that is it was amazing. His answer, he said, well, I play that many instruments. When he performs with, like, if you go to a concert with James Morrison, you're going to see him play at least 4 different instruments, maybe 4 or 5 at a concert. He took the view that, well, if I've got to warm up on every one of those instruments before I play, I'm going to be I'm never going to get to play. So he just taught himself from day one to not need a warm-up, to be able to actually just pick up an instrument, whether that's a trombone or a saxophone or a trumpet or a piano, and just get in there and do the job. And I think, to me, that's a fascinating concept, but it's foreign to the trumpet world. But if you're a little kid and just think, I can't do this, I can't, if I warm up for 5 minutes on the piano and then warm up on the trombone for 5 minutes and then there's 15 minutes before I can even go out there. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to play a song. So he's just trained mentally and his body that his thing is, I'll just pick up the instrument, whatever it is, and away I go. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, trumpeters love their warm-ups, don't they? But I think the way that I view a warm-up, and this is just my own view, so people can have whatever view they want, but the way I view it is like you don't just go off and run 2 miles without doing some stretches, some warm-ups of some sort, or you want to get your mind focused. You want to do some deep breathing maybe, and get your mind and your body ready for it. I mean, but you're not going to run like a lap around the track,
I agree.
At full speed before you run 2 miles.
And just on that, James made a point of saying that his warm-up is mental. He said he's thinking about the gig. If the gig's at 8:00 at night, about after lunch in the afternoon, he's actually thinking about the gig. He's thinking about, what am I going to play first? Am I going to start on flugelhorn? So his sort of answer is that mentally he's been preparing for that performance for 4, 5 or 6 hours on that day. But he hasn't been, like you're saying, he hasn't been running, a mini marathon for the 100-meter sprint. But and I also had the chance. I'll just throw a few other little trumpet interactions with you. I had the chance to interact with Marvin Stamm online. As I say, about 10 years ago, I sort of took some interest in the trumpet again. I turned 50, and I thought, I'll ask around. I'm a bit interested still in playing the trumpet. So I got a trumpet, and this is around the era of the Jim Manley lesson, but before the Jim Manley lesson. I reached out to Marvin Stamm, who I've loved. I used to listen to, over here, you'd look at the back of all the LPs, and just about every second album that came out of New York in the trumpet section was Marvin Stamm. He was a very popular New York session man for an extended period in New York. And a fantastic, just a generous person. So I sent him an email and said, look, I'm just interested in your thoughts on playing the trumpet. I'd like to get a lesson with you. And Marvin just said, it's too hard to talk about over the email. Set up a time, we'll do a Skype thing. So it never was a lesson. It was a discussion with Marvin. And an amazing, the technique, one of the takeaway for me from Marvin Stamm was, because I'm actually a flute player, is one of the instruments I play. And Marvin says, I just think of playing the trumpet like a flute. And you get your mind around, get your mind around that. You get your mind around that, the sound of a trumpet. And Marvin is an amazing jazz player, but in his New York days, he was, the high note session, hello, bang, just pinging off notes that you wouldn't believe. The last image I had in my mind of Marvin Stamm playing trumpet is that he's thinking of playing like a flute.
Well, how would you describe playing like a flute?
Okay, because, and I just say to people, do a Google search on Marvin Stamm, playing like a jazz solo. And when you listen to it, he hears the trumpet with the delicacy of the flute. So if he's going like ba ba doo da ba doo da ba ba ba, he's hearing that not like ba 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 da da ta ya like a normal trumpet player where they're just like this big aggressive thing. No, he wants the delicacy. He wants that instrument to respond as if it was a flute. And when you listen to him play, after he told me that, I went and started listening to him playing, I'm thinking, I can hear it. I can hear it in his playing. His playing is so fluid, and it's got the big, robust sound of a trumpet, but it doesn't sound like the muscle man, he-man, Iron Man approach to playing the trumpet. It's very flexible. His solos when he plays are effortless, but also with to me, not the traditional sound image of a trumpet. But you can only hear that if you'd heard Marvin say that himself. And then I sort of asked him, well, what do you think about when you play? I'd been reading about, buzzing your lips and free lip buzzing and mouthpiece buzzing. Like everything, one of the dangers on the internet now is that, there's 101 different theories on how to play any instrument. So I said to Marvin, do you use a buzzing embouchure? There's dead. Yeah, exactly. There's dead silence. And he said, "What do you?" And he spent about 5 minutes asking me, "What did I mean by a buzzing embouchure?" Because I'm watching these dudes going like with their lips, and I'm thinking, "Well, Marvin, he's got such a range, and he plays so effortlessly. He must be doing that." And he just shook his head. He just said, "No," And I'm sort of saying, "Well, what do you do?" And here's a fantastic player, and he just sort of said, I hear the sound in my head that I want to play, and I'm looking for the effortless approach of a flute player, and I let my mind and my body do whatever they've got to do to create that sound. And I just sort of thought, like there's a guy, like Marvin's been playing professionally, I think for 60 years now, maybe even more. And I just sit back and think, wow, that's something that you need to sit down with a cup of coffee and a nice, cool breeze and just think through that. And I'm happy to share that with you, because if you listen to Marvin Stam play, next time someone listens, think of the image of how a great flute player can get around their instrument without all the huffing and puffing and the lifting up the 200-pound weights and the wedge breath and God knows whatever else is out there. He just didn't. He wouldn't come in. He wouldn't buy into any of that. And I actually said to him, "So do you do any isometric exercises or anything like that over the years?" And he sort of said, "Oh no." He said, "I really haven't." The closest he'd come to something like that was he did believe for people starting out that the use of the burp, the little attachment that you can put on the truck. He thought, not that he personally did much, but he thought that was a useful way for someone to just get the idea of producing a note on a mouthpiece without getting carried away with it and then applying that. So I just sort of share that as a wonderful memory of interacting with one of the great trumpet players, Marvin
Wonderful.
Stam.
I want to, before we go further, because I want to pick your brain about, we've been doing interviews by proxy of 3 different players already, but I want to pick your brain a little bit. But before I do, I want to share one anecdote about going back to the warm up. And I lived in Louisville, Kentucky at the time, and the late Michael Tunnell was the professor of trumpet at the University of Louisville, and I was playing in a brass band in Louisville. And one thing that he said that has stuck with me all these years, this is 11 years ago, he was kind of on the topic of warm-ups, and he just said, sometimes you just have to trust that your body is going to do what it needs to do. And because I think it was in the context of sometimes you're just in a rush and you don't have 10 minutes to warm up. You just have to trust that you've got it. You've put in the work already, and there comes a time where that warm up might become a bit of a crutch, or maybe even an obstacle to really doing your best. So wanted to share that. It's a little tribute to a great trumpeter who passed away several years ago, far too soon. But now I want to talk about you, Brian, because we've been given all these. I feel like I've been interviewing Marvin Stam and Jim Manley and James Morrison.
Yes, that's right.
But tell us about you. You're a musician, right?
I am. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, so I've been playing music. I started when I was about 8.5. Started out on guitar. My brother is 4 years older than me, and so there was when he turned 13 and he got an acoustic guitar for his 13th birthday, and it was lying around the house, and I sort of brushed my fingers across the strings of that instrument and just stood back and thought, wow, what is that? I don't know what that is. Where's that magic coming from? And it was just the sound of music. I didn't know what it was. So I focused on guitar probably for about at least the first 10 years of my life. And then of my musical life. Yes, I started when I was about 8.5. So about the first 10 years on guitar. So self-taught on all of my instruments. I play for taxation reasons over here. I recently had a count up, reassess my asset register. And I actually own 29 instruments, 29 different instruments, and some really good ones in there, some really expensive ones. So over the years, now that's not, I don't play 29 different instruments. They probably grouped into something like 8, 9 or 10 different categories. So piccolo, concert, and alto flute. but they're three instruments, one category. So
trumpeters might know something about that.
Yeah. But 29 physical instruments. So how did all that come about? Well, my brother proved to be an amazing guitarist, and I was just in his shadow, and he was the lead player. I was the rhythm player. And, he would start developing quite a bit of notoriety around the area where we lived. And I started playing a little bit of lead. But in public, even if I played the lead, people would come up to my brother and congratulate him on a wonderful guitar solo. So from my point of view, I'm thinking, there's no chance here. No matter how good I get, people are giving the pats on the back to my brother. And that's the honest reason of why I started to look at other instruments. And the journey just evolved. I started, my first other instrument was steel guitar, slide guitar, because I thought, okay, I've got a bit of a idea of guitar, but this is now playing it with a slide. And that was a bit of a journey. Wind instruments started. My brother got an interest in saxophone, and he actually purchased a Selma Paris. It was a Mark 7 at that stage, brand new tenor sax, had never played a note. And by his own admission, I think anyone who heard him, he was a terrible saxophonist. He just didn't suit. He just didn't work. So I ended up buying his saxophone Orpheum because I thought, geez, I like that. And I still have it to this day. I actually play that tenor is the one that I play. So I just went on a journey. And Jim Manley actually asked me when I was interviewing him, he said, well, yeah, Jim was fascinated by how I could play so many instruments where he'd spent his whole life on one. And I think the honest answer is, for me, I've always been fascinated by music, but not so much by wanting to be, the greatest or even an amazing player on any of those instruments. I've been fascinated by sound. And I think that's why I've had a really enjoyable, 50-year life as a musician, because I've been focused on just using my instruments to create a sound. If I'm playing the Pink Panther, I'm not going to play it on the piccolo flute. I'm probably going to play it on the tenor saxophone. If I'm playing, a song that is associated with the sound of another instrument, well, I'll play it on that instrument. But yeah, so I suppose that experience has made me in some way, just tying that back to trumpet playing, sort of shake my head. I think trumpet players are generally isolated. That's the only instrument they play. And sometimes I think that's to their detriment, because I don't know. What do you think? Do you play instruments other than the trumpet, or have you spent your life focusing solely on the trumpet?
No, I mean, the only one that I play that's worth listening to is the trumpet. I can play a song on the piano, and I don't know the reason why, and I understand what you're saying, because a lot of instrumentalists, they'll be multi-instrumentalists like yourself, and I wonder if maybe there's some overlap between the saxophone and the flute, whereas with the trumpet, it's just like it is kind of exclusive, and I think it's so difficult just to maintain your chops. In some ways, just the thought of learning another instrument is like, wait, I don't have time for that. I've got to, work this amount every day just so I can sound decent. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think in history, there's I think there's the natural players, but I agree. I think my experience for most people who play the trumpet is it's a full-time job as far as playing that instrument goes. But also, if I can interrupt, I think the demand for trumpet is such that there's not really a need to learn another instrument. I think a lot of people, they'll learn a second or third instrument because there's just not enough work to go around for whatever. But historically, over the last 100 years, there's been plenty of work for trumpeters. So that could be another reason. It could be another reason.
Kind of theorizing here.
No. I mean, I go back to the only reason I took up the flute was I was playing. I had an opportunity to play lead alto in a good big band. It wasn't a full-time paid big band, but I remember sitting in that chair and playing. I don't know what it was, a Glenn Miller chart. And much to my horror, when I turned the page, it says flute. and I'm looking, and everyone's looking. I'm thinking, I don't own a flute, let alone play a flute. So it's interesting that my thing is, well, if I'm interested in becoming a better and more career opportunities as a sax player, hello, I better go to the music shop and buy a flute.
All right. So you're playing a Glenn Miller song?
Yeah, I forget what it was. It might have been String of Pearls or something, but it was the original professional chart. And of course, and this is interesting, trumpet player versus non-trumpet player perspective. As a reed player, certainly in if I go, it's probably not so much nowadays, but if you're a sax player and you were looking for a job in a pit orchestra or whatever, it was just expected that you played the flute, the clarinet, and the saxophone. They were not going to pay a clarinetist to sit there and play, a few little parts of the thing. And in some ways, I often sort of think, and I know the trumpet's a hard instrument to play, but I often think, damn, you think of the life of a sax player. There's the cost of those three instruments physically. So the trumpet player walks in with a trumpet and maybe a flugelhorn, but the sax player walks in with, and depending on what the gig is, an alto or a tenor or a soprano, a concert flute and a B-flat clarinet, is really, if you are going to try and make a living as a sax player in a style where reading music is important. I mean, I've never, and it's an interesting point here, I might share this with you right now, is whilst I am regarded as playing many of my instruments to a professional standard, I have never been a professional musician. I have always I've always had another source of income or incomes that has allowed me to pick and choose what I want to do in music. And I just share that with your listeners because I think a lot of people, maybe trumpet players more than most, there's almost this shame attached to not being able to earn your living playing the instrument. And I think that's completely unfounded. I've had some friends who have been professional musicians, and they generally are the most jaded people in my group of friends, because you'll run into them, they'll just say, what have you been doing last night? Oh, I've just been on another cruise ship playing the hits of ABBA every night again and again, really depressed. So I just want to share that with you. I mean, I've done some things I'm very proud of in music, but I have never, ever wanted to rely solely on my music to earn my income. And I just share that. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
No, I will say, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I remember this was six years ago. I was getting ready to leave the military because I was in the U.S. Army, employed as a musician, playing the trumpet. And I was just thinking, man, I'm going to be out in probably 6 months from now. And what is my career going to look like? I thought, do I really want to get into that routine of teaching and gigging, or can I get into this thing that I've been dabbling with called podcasting? And it was, I'm not going to say it was easy, it was a hard road, but 6 years later, that's how I make my living, is not necessarily producing my own podcasts at the moment, but like people pay me to produce their podcasts, and I don't have to take every single gig. I can take whatever gig I want.
Yeah.
I make my own gigs.
Yeah. And I might share, it might be of interest to your podcast listeners, because regardless of what instrument they're into, in 2016, just as a little test project, I put a first video up on YouTube. I set up a YouTube account in 2016. I put up a video. I even forget what it is. I think it was on breathing for wind instruments. 2 years, and I just dabbled. I put a few videos up, but in 2018, I was enjoying the concept, even though I was only putting a video up once a month or something. I liked the discipline for me to actually force myself to sit down and record myself, both a video with video and audio. It was almost like a bit of a discipline for me to help me in my own practice, to keep interested. Since 2018, I've made almost a religious commitment to post a video once a week to my YouTube channel. Now, it's currently sitting, only in the last week or so, it's past 2 million views. I think it's currently on 2,015,000 views and close to 12,000 subscribers. That growth has been entirely organic. I have not spent a cent. I have no other social media. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on, diddly bop boo, whatever the new one is this week. I'm purely committed to posting a video that I think will be useful to someone with a music interest. And through that, I have taught students on many instruments. I counted it up the other day, in 13 different countries. So my YouTube channel is just a lovely free advertising for me to be very selective about who I teach. And I think that's like you've picked on. My lifestyle has allowed me to decide how much I'll charge for a lesson, what time of day I'm interested in teaching, and am I really interested in teaching the person who's approaching me. I don't care whether they're a beginner or a professional. It's just their genuine interest in learning, and do I have anything to offer them? As you said, when you come out of the military, my thing is I could not be, there's no way in the world could I be a professional music teacher. Teaching little John, little Jimmy and little Jane. And I over the years, I've experimented with a class tuition, the stupidest thing I ever did. Because, assuming that 2 people, let alone 5 or 30, are at the same level of what you were trying to teach them, I rapidly worked out, no, this is not for me. So I just think the people who teach in the schools and the universities and that, they should get some Medal of Valor or something, because how you could do that for a living, not for me. I just couldn't do it, because I don't also think that I could offer the individuals anywhere near what I want to offer a person when they come to me. So the takeout from that is I have not spent a cent, no Google ads, nothing, no other social media. But the reason is people say to me, I tried YouTube and I only had, 10 views. I said, how long did you try it for? I tried it for a month. What videos did you post? Oh, something that I thought they'd like. My thing is, how do you know what they'd like? One of the highest hitting videos I've got is a video about the difference between a tenor and a concert ukulele. Or the saxophone family. It's not on how to play a diminished scale over, a minor 7 flat 5 chord or something. It's just something, and I don't try and predict. If I get a video that has a high number of views, that's not my next video. My next video is what I feel like putting up this week that I think will help someone.
Nice. Okay, so this YouTube channel, this isn't the current Music Mind podcast. This is something different?
No. The Music Mind podcast I'm currently posting on my YouTube channel. So if anyone goes to my web, I'm at the moment I'm not separately. I'm just posting it on my channel. I also am putting it on Buzzsprout, an audio-only version, which goes to all of the other ones. But my podcasts at this stage are aimed at a video podcast, for which I also offer an audio only. So on my website, it's just if someone types in, Brian Hayes YouTube, so my name YouTube, they'll actually find my YouTube channel. I've got a link to my YouTube channel at the bottom of my website, but I'm not hard to find on YouTube. They could type in Brian Hayes sax and you'll find the YouTube channel.
So you said you've had a total of 12 million views?
No, two.
Oh,
2 million.
Okay,
2 million.
only 2 million. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's still impressive. Good for you.
It's impressive. Yeah. It absolutely.
Very
because,
good.
Most people, when you see that they've got 20 million views, you sort of think, most people are.
You must be rich.
Well, I tell you what, the other thing I do, and I'll share this with you, I don't allow comments on my YouTube channel. I have no interest whether Charlie or Jane thinks I can play, as I said on Jim's thing, the thing of, my mum plays better than you. I'm not interested in spending half a second of my life addressing whether someone likes what I'm posting. If you don't like it, run away. I do allow the tick of the likes and the dislikes, and thankfully the likes are absolutely in the majority. Interestingly, I read on Google where Google's algorithms couldn't care less whether someone likes a video or dislikes it. They give the same weighting to the interaction. So I often think when someone, I hate your video, tick, I dislike it. Thank you. Because from Google's point of view, someone's interacted with that video. So I'll just share that too. Some people are really scared if someone dislikes their video.
Well, all right. So you have, I'm just looking at your playlist here, and I see it's very consistent. It seems like 90% of your videos have between 300 to 700 views. A few have a little bit more than that. A few have a little bit less than that. Rock and Roll Sax Techniques has almost 10,000. But that's an anomaly. So it seems
I think one has 100,000 views, so that pushes it up. Some have 40,000 views. Most start with 100 views on the first week, and by the end of the first couple of months, they're up there. So it's not. I'm not interested. If I wanted to get views, I could put a clip up of how to play the Pink Panther, or how to play the best hits of ABBA, or whoever the superstar is of the day. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in, again, because I'm my own master. If I think, for example, that people will have interest in how to play blues on an alto flute, I'll put a video up there knowing that I might get 50 views. But the thing is, I'll often get some of the videos that I have the least number of views, I get the most emails from and lessons from, because the poor guy or girl who's got an alto flute is stuck largely in a very limited area of classical music where they haven't wrote too much for the alto flute in any music style. The chance to learn how to improvise on the alto flute with something modern is a good example of, you become a big fish in a little pond. So it's not about views. And the other thing is that I've found that many of the times the clips that have the high views, I actually don't get any interaction from. People obviously enjoy it, but they don't come to me and say, oh, by the way, I'd like to engage with you. I love that clip.
Right. So you're not and you're the first to admit that you're not a, quote, professional musician. But, the way that you kind of posture yourself on your YouTube channel is you posture yourself as an authority. Like you say, this is how you do this. What is it?
This is my opinion on how to do it. So I've played. I just want to be clear on that. It's the definition of professional. Do I earn my entire living from music? No, never wanted to, never have. Do I play at a professional standard? According to many people that interact with me, yes, I do.
I've always viewed professional, not always, because I used to have that mindset that if you don't make your living playing music, then you're not a professional. But I've come to realize that as time has gone on and music is not my source of income, I've realized that professional is more of a mindset than something that it has more to do with what's going on inside of your mind. Whenever you sit down and you pick up your instrument, no matter, even if it's one time a month, if you have a professional mindset, then you're setting yourself up for success. And it has nothing to do with making money doing it, because I've seen a lot of people get paid a lot of money to play very unprofessionally, very unprofessional mindset.
Well, let's just talk, for example, a professional guitarist might be a guy who spends his living playing 3-chord country music or 3-chord rock and roll. If you want to learn the guitar, does that necessarily mean someone who can play a D, G, and an A 7th chord is the best person to help you learn the guitar? Well, if you want to learn a D, G, and an A 7th chord, well, he or she is as equally as qualified as anyone else. But I think that's a really important point, because the professional musician, not 9 times out of 10, but many professional musicians, absolutely. I'll tell you a story here. And this might really help some people, again, trumpet players. I got to talk to George Gola, who in Australia is famous as one of the greatest jazz musicians Australia has produced, a professional jazz guitarist all his life. I got to meet George and have just a nice conversation with George in Sydney once, and he asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm semi-professionally playing. I actually got to play with George at an event in Sydney, and he absolutely loved my playing, which is interesting. I was a semi-professional player surrounded by people earning their living out of music. And George said, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a part-time musician. And he said, geez, thinking back, I wished at a young age, he thought of becoming a dentist, but he ended up being a professional musician. And he said, I've often thought I would have rather have a separate, well-paying professional career and do my music on the side, because at that stage he was a jazz player, and he basically said that he had released 20 albums, some of them funded by the Australian Broadcasting Commission, our national broadcaster. But he just openly said, and he actually said this later on on a podcast, that he hadn't made enough money from the sales of those 20 albums to buy one decent pair of shoes. Now, you stop to think about that. This is one of Australia's top professional musicians releasing 20 albums, and the illusion is, for someone who might be sitting on the side, geez, I'd like to release some recordings because that's where I'll make some money. He was genuine about that there was no money in jazz recording in Australia, even though he continued to do it because he loved the concept of the legacy of it. But I just want to, someone listening to that might think, oh, wow, I thought you just played for a living and thoroughly enjoyed it, which playing. At the time I had that conversation with him, he was playing at the equivalent of clubs, I don't know, just like clubs in America, but RSL clubs here, Return Services Leagues Club. He was playing music that was very mundane, and he occasionally was playing jobs that he enjoyed. But his point to me was he was only enjoying, as a professional musician, 20% of the jobs that he was playing. And if he had his time over again, there's a great clarinetist in America, if people want to look up Ron Odrich. He's RONODRICH.com. For people, this discussion we're having, it's a very good discussion. Ron's a professional dentist in New York. He's had a dental career in New York, but he's also a very successful clarinetist. He's had his own quartet and they've recorded. I think he was nominated for a Grammy. At any rate, if people look up that Ron story, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Ron has never been a professional. You can't say Ron's a professional musician. Yet if you read his list of achievements, Ron is a dentist who has explored his love of music on the clarinet and only doing what he chooses to do on the clarinet at a professional. If you listen to Ron Odrich play, he plays at a professional standard, but he is not a professional musician. That's the best way I can explain it. Yeah.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it just kind of depends on how you define the word professional, because
yes,
you have the money aspect and then you have the mindset aspect. So yeah, it's a discussion that will never end. Certainly not in the time that we have together now.
Oh, no.
I have to. I just saw this on your YouTube channel,
yeah.
And I hope this is okay with you. But I want to know if it's okay, because I have my screen recording software going on, so I can record the sound from my computer. Yeah. Can we listen to the Tijuana Groove for Electric Trumpet?
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna play this for people listening in, and then I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm just gonna.
No, I'm not.
I'll play it, and then
I
just want to get some thoughts from you on it. So here is Tijuana Groove for Electric Trumpet with Brian Hayes. Here we go. Is this an actual trumpet?
Yeah, that's a Yamaha 8310Z Bobby shoe one.
And what's electric about it?
Okay, on the mouthpiece, there's a piezo pickup.
Oh,
and I'm playing.
Okay.
So it's a mouthpiece pickup, and I'm playing that through a harmonizer pedal.
Oh yeah, man, I love it.
Now, interestingly, this is what blows me away. Now, one of the instruments I do not teach is trumpet. I don't. If you look at the list, Jim Manley said he loved that track, asked me where I got the pickup, and bought the same pickup. So what I just sit back and think, that's what I love about music. I regard myself as an absolute beginner on trumpet, yet I have had so many emails about Tijuana Groove. Brian, have you got the music for that? How did you do that? I think I've sold a dozen pickups for the guy that it's an Australian who makes that pickup. And that's what I love about music. You haven't got to be the world's greatest player on an instrument to actually create some interesting music on an instrument. So I'm glad you picked that track, because I shake my head. And Jim, if you ask Jim, he loves it. He thought fantastic, and he ended up buying that the same model pickup. So I've been a musician. I'm not interested in being the best in the world on any instrument, because I think that's a really hard one. And I'll just tell a quick story here. Over here in Australia, one of my heroes, and he's passed away recently, was Don Burrows. And Don was a multi-instrumentalist, a fantastic clarinet, saxophone and flute player. He did a tour with Eddie Daniels. Now, Eddie Daniels from the USA, a great clarinet and saxophone player. And they played together and they went around. It was around Easter time. And over here in Australia, there's a number of public holidays at Easter. We end up with a 4-day long weekend for the Easter break. And Eddie said they had a break in touring. And Eddie said to Don, what are you going to do over the Easter break? Don said, I'm going fishing. What are you doing? And Eddie was just shocked that Don Burrows, Australia's greatest clarinet player, was going to take an absolute break from playing any instrument for 4 days. And he sort of told his story to Don. He sort of reached out to Don. Well, he said, I'm going to be locked in the room. I'm going to be practicing 6 or 7 hours a day. I've got to stay. If I want to be the number one clarinet player in the USA, I've got to be practicing every day. And Don, when he tells the story, just shook his head as if, wow, if you actually heard both players, Don Burrows played at an absolute world standard. But it was just that I actually, when I heard that, I felt sorry for Eddie Daniels. That, imagine the Sydney Harbour, Don's going fishing, and Eddie's locked away practicing super hard so that when he goes back to America, he's still number one. And I just compare. I guess I compare that to Tijuana Groove there. I'm at that time that video was played. I don't know. I don't think I could play a C scale up to third space C. But it didn't matter. I didn't need to be able to play a 2.5 octave range to play that song. I didn't hear it like that. So I just sort of, and you must, as a trumpet player, must feel that Eddie Daniels story. I know so many trumpet players feel if I don't practice, today, there's that fear that tomorrow when I pick up the instrument, no sound will come out. And I think, wow, that's a tough gig. That's a tough gig,
Yeah, I think once you've been through college or you've played for years and years and years, things just kind of come to you more naturally. And I can say that I can take an extended break now that I'm in my 40s and pick it up, and within a week I'm in rough, decent shape. Whereas when I was 18, I went through basic training in the Army, and I couldn't make a sound. But 20 years later, it wasn't as big of a deal. And I think you just kind of build up your chops and you build up your muscles, and it just your muscles know what to do if you just trust your muscles and your body to do what it knows to do.
And I'll just add one comment here again. James Morrison, with COVID-19, he said it's the first, because in Australia we're like you guys, we're still half shut down at the moment, but it was the first time in his life where for 3 months he didn't play the trumpet. He actually took the opportunity when the whole country's shut down, you're not allowed to play anywhere. He just took a break. And he said when he picked up his trumpet 3 months down the track, he said, I could do everything I ever could on the trumpet for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
He said, I had the same range. He said, I had the same technique. He said, I had the same sound. And he said it was such a brutal shock.
Yep.
and because it was the first time ever that he had not touched that instrument gigging. As he said, he hardly ever practices. He gigs all the time. But I stood there and thought, isn't that amazing? He said, I could do everything I could ever do on the trumpet for 10 minutes.
Right.
And that for him was a real rude awakening. And he said he took down, you know what I mean? And COVID, that's something COVID forced on him. So I think you're absolutely right, provided...
I wonder how long it took him to get back in, like... Where he
said a number of weeks.
Yeah.
I got the impression that it probably took him a month to get back to where he could play all night, or he could just play forever.
The difference between that is he got back into it, playing at a very, very high standard in a month.
Yes.
You know, and it probably took him years upon decades to get to that level initially.
40 years of playing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But he takes 3 months off, and in many cases, it's kind of like starting over. His lips were probably beginning to atrophy a little bit.
Yes.
But he was in shape, and it took him a month to get back into top shape. So, word to the wise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
take it for what it's worth. You don't need to play every day.
No. Just one comment I would make and for the trumpet audience, and it comes across in Jim Manley's interview that I did with him. I really think it's important for every single note instrument player, I don't care what it is, to be able to play a chordal instrument at some basic level, whether that's a 4-string ukulele that you can pick up for $30 anywhere in the world. To me, if you can play 4-note harmony on an instrument, that I've seen with pupils on the very many lessons I've done on wind instrument players, their concept of sound and their concept of being able to play their instrument absolutely improves. If I say to someone on clarinet or saxophone or flute, mate, imagine the band's playing F7 in the background. Just play a little melody against that. You'll just get this. What's F7? So then you get the da da da. Yeah, well, an arpeggio's not the chord, but you pick up a 4-string, a humble ukulele, and play an F7 chord. Hello, when they've been able to create that sound themselves, to me, the penny drops in their mind, and almost to a person. The next time I say, let's just imagine that we're jamming on a whatever the chord is, if they've been able to create that sound themselves, they're playing, the musicality of their playing improves. So I'd certainly, if I was going to give any advice to trumpet players, I think there's a danger of spending your whole life going, and whatever it is, and never actually in your mind understanding what does a minor chord sound like, what does a major 7th chord sound like, what does a minor 7th chord sound like. You might have an opinion because you do dabble a bit on the piano, so I guess that's where you've found that inspiration there, I imagine. Is that true or not?
Honestly, I just wanted to learn the Moonlight Sonata when I was 19 years old, and I just learned it. And that's the only song I can still play. But I understand what you're saying. It gives you a deeper appreciation and really a deeper understanding of a single note instrument like the trumpet or the saxophone
or any instrument, any single note instrument.
And singing absolutely makes you a better anything.
Oh, 100%. I totally agree with you there. Particularly, and I might just add one other comment. I came into music from a sound perspective. I didn't learn to read music until I sort of got away from the guitar. And if I had my time over again, I'd do the same thing again. Because to me, when you're reading music, if I look at a piece of music, it's a picture. It's a sound picture. It's not 400 notes to be popped off one after the other. I mean, if you've got 4 1-beat C's there, you know, it's a sound in your mind. Da, 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 da. It's not C, 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 C. Because I always say to people as a multi-instrument, mate, that's only C on your instrument. If you're playing it on a B-flat instrument, that's not C for the flute player or the piano player. It's not C for the alto sax player. I think a lot of people who only learn to read from music really struggle if the music stand falls over and someone goes da 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 da, bang, the music stands fall over. There's this fear of, I don't know how to play Happy Birthday. I can't hear it in my head. So that's another bit of advice. I think for people who may be stuck, and a lot of my pupils come to me because they like the way I play. I get a giggle. I get a Skype lesson from a New York jazz tenor sax player. And I'm thinking, dude, you're in ground zero for jazz tenor sax player in New York. What do you want to learn from me? And the thing is, you sound different to the players. I don't play like John Coltrane. I haven't been through the Berklee College of Music 500 method books and whatever. So I do sound different. And I find that's what I love, because I'm the best qualified person to teach someone who enjoys how I play. If they want to learn a little bit about how I play, I'm absolutely the most qualified person to do that. But I just share that with you. I've had a classical clarinet player from Italy take a clarinet lesson from me, because I don't play classical on any instrument. And this person loved the sound I got on the clarinet and wanted to know a little bit about how I play the clarinet. I loved it. And it was one of those moments in life where you think, this is crazy. Why is this person reaching out to me? And it's from the YouTube clips. So because I'm not the person, one of the things that I feel not disappointed, what's the right word? Over here in Australia, there's very little work for the many people that are falling out of the universities of music every year. It may be different in America. But the people, as they fall out of those universities, they get their bit of paper. But certainly in Australia, if you want to be invited to play with a great jazz band, you don't turn up with your degree for jazz performance as an entry requirement. Word gets out that you're a good player and you'll be invited to play. I just wonder whether the music, and it may be very different in America, but whether the education system is letting the students down from 2 points of view, with a false expectation of a career, that you'll walk out with your degree and there's a career waiting for you. In Australia, that is incredibly false. We've got just over half the population of California here, in a geographic size, the equivalent of the USA. The music industry is incredibly small. And each year you might have 20 saxophone people walking out with their jazz degrees, just to make it even harder. The work for a jazz saxophonist is, I just think those 30 people have paid an awful amount of money. And the other thing is they all sound the same. You can pick the graduates. They all, that you can tell who they've listened to, you can tell what they've done. What's it like in America, do you think? Like when someone spends $100,000 a year at Berklee to get their bit of paper, is there genuine work for the number of people coming out?
In my opinion, in some ways, students are sold a bill of goods when it comes to getting a music education or a degree. The upside, like the reason that someone would want to go to a Juilliard or a Berklee is because of the contacts. It's because of who you're going to get to know. And, I know people who have been to Juilliard, and I also know that many, many great musicians, jazz musicians, have dropped out of Juilliard, and they're doing just fine. And they don't regret it for a minute. So I think the reason that people, I think that if you go to a conservatory thinking that it's going to be a ticket to a career, or if someone tells you that, then I think that they're a little bit misguided, or they're giving you bad advice. But if you go to a place where it's going to be a highly concentrated musical environment, and you're going to be exposed to great musicians, if you're going to be in a great city like New York, where you're going to have opportunities to gig, then, if you know what you're doing.
There's value in that. I agree.
And if you go there with a specific purpose, then it can work in your favor. But if you just go thinking that you're just going to have a job waiting for you, well, for a musician, of all people, we should know better than that. So I think it comes back to what your motives are. What are you looking to get out of it?
I agree. And I think the cost of the education, like how in Australia, the equivalent, to study, and Berkeley's a fantastic place to study off campus in Australia. To get a 4-year degree from Berkeley in Australian currency is $400,000. Get your mind around how long, that's a jazz degree. Get your mind around how long would you live long enough to pay that $400,000 back. It's not playing jazz. So I just have a bit, like you said, sometimes I think people, I don't know, I can't get my mind around that aspect of it. If you've got the money, yes, but if you think that money is going to buy you a career, I'm not too sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's a hard thing, and I think it's different for everybody. And I can't just sit here and pass judgment on it and just say that this is people are being misled, or I'm not in a position to do that. But
no, neither am I. I think it's just everyone needs to, I think, go into those situations genuinely informed, and make their own decision and financially.
But I think in my opinion, you can create that same environment, because I was a late bloomer as a trumpeter. Like I've always played since I was 8 years old. I've never had more than a few months where I didn't play, but I didn't really take it seriously as like wanting to make it a profession until I was in my early 30s. So in that regard, I was a late bloomer, and by that time I was married. I tried to go to college and get an undergraduate degree. That was not going to work, because that lifestyle does not, it's just not compatible with the married life. And so I just realized, I can mimic that same environment. I can get in the brass bands. I can take lessons with the professor that I would be studying with anyway. May not be the same level of attention, may not be the same the frequency of lessons, but I can internalize, and I can teach myself. And I in all humility, I can say that I brought myself to a level of playing at a very high level. Dare I say, a professional level.
Good.
And I didn't go to school for it. I have a degree in political science. So
okay.
It can be done.
Well, I think you and I are both examples of a different path. I was just talking about performance, and I totally agree. One of Australia's greatest musical exports is the guitar player Tommy Emmanuel. Now, Tommy is a successful performer right around the world. He's largely regarded as, probably one of the top 5 acoustic fingerstyle guitar players of all time. Tommy is completely self-taught. The reason he's a success is from when he grew up, he was performing. The only thing he's ever done in life is perform. And if you ever get the chance to go to a Tommy Emmanuel concert, you will see one of the most amazing solo concert performers that you'll ever see, because he's genuine. And he hasn't learnt those skills through a music college. He actually doesn't read music, but he is one of the world's best performers on the guitar, because he spent his life performing. And I often say, when I'm teaching younger people, what do you want to do for a living? I want to perform. I'm drawn very much to the thing is, mate, well, have you ever thought of going down to the street corner and starting busking, putting your performing talents to the test? And most people grin and say, "Oh no, I'll go and get my performance degree from the conservatorium." And I'm thinking, if I was you, I would test out your love of performing by putting your skills on the street to the test. If you can make a person stop and listen to you and maybe give you 50 cents, well, then there's potentially something, and you enjoy it. You enjoy that experience of, look at me, I'm doing something that's got value. Are you prepared to stop and listen, or maybe even contribute to it? And so I just share that with you. I think if you really want to perform, that's a great way on any instrument to test out the lifestyle. And you'll soon find out whether it's for you. Because a lot of people say, I did that, I hated it. Well, mate, you've got to find a way to like it, because performing is you're asking a lot from people. You're asking people to be quiet and give up some of their life, their limited time in life, to watch what you've got to say to them. I think there's a little bit of advice, I suppose, I give to people. If you're interested in performing, you can test it for free anywhere in the world. just go somewhere with some people and put it to the test.
Nice. Well, Brian, I'm going to confess. I have a confession to make here.
Yep.
I walked into this interview thinking, this is a saxophone player. This is going to take 15 minutes, and then I can have the rest of the night off.
Dreaded saxophone player.
This just has been a real blast, and unfortunately, I have commitments. You have commitments, so we have to part ways for now.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, sure. I hope that we can do a round 2 sometime.
Absolutely.
But let me just tell people where we can find you. It's Brian Hayes, HAYES .biz.
For us in Australia.
Yes, Brian Hayes .biz. And just go to YouTube and just type in Brian Hayes and you'll see his channel pop right up.
And the Jim Manley interview is on that channel as well. I really encourage trumpet players to watch Jim's because they'll love it. Jim, I thoroughly enjoyed interacting with Jim, and he was really he was really happy with the interview. So I guess you get to see another side of Jim there that he hasn't been, because I took it not from a trumpet player's perspective. As he said, he's done a number of trumpet podcasts, and he welcomed the opportunity of I guess a broader sense of him as a musician than a trumpet player.
And this is
James. Yeah,
this is kind of an off the wall question, but do you mind if I play the YouTube on my podcast?
No, by all means.
Okay,
the more
great.
people that get to see that, by all means, I think, and Jim would love that too.
Okay.
It's something he is very happy with it. I actually got to play. We finished the podcast off just to show a little bit of a different thing. I actually played pedal steel. I wrote a song on pedal steel guitar to deliberately put Jim's trumpet in a different context. I said to Jim in the podcast, had he ever played with a steel guitar? No. He loved, one of the things that he loved was an opportunity to put himself out of his comfort zone and interact with a pedal steel guitar. It's a track that I'm really happy with and he's happy with. So I think your trumpet players will really enjoy watching that track. It's called Slide Away.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, James.
Well, thanks for pressing play on today's episode. Make sure you press that little subscribe button on your podcast player if you haven't already, so you'll never miss an episode when they publish. And if you want to dive deeper, you can visit me on the web at jamesnewcombontrumpet.com, where you'll find ways to connect with me via social media and even a customized mobile app that has a plethora of material I think you'll find interesting. Again, that's jamesnewcombontrumpet.com. This is James Newcomb, signing off.